Hello and welcome to this session, and in this session we shall again continue our understanding of programming through pattern programming. In this session particularly, I need to tell you as to how this program can be recoded using a different loop. Well, here you can see I have made use of the for loop, but then I can also do the same by making use of the while loop. So how really can I be making use of the other types of loops and write the same program efficiently? Let me explain. If I will have to write the same program by making use of the while loop, then all that I really have to do is to remove this for loop and bring in a while loop at its place. Well, irrespective of the kind of loop that you shall be using, you already know that there are three aspects or three components associated with the loop: the initialization, the condition check, and the incrementation or decrementation. Well, that way, when a suitable scenario arises, I shall be speaking about decrementation. So for the time being, I shall remove decrementation from my discussion, and you know that these happen to be the three components of a loop. And in case of the while loop, what you really have to understand is that the initialization shall happen just before the beginning of the loop, like this. And then the condition check shall be happening in the beginning of the loop, and then the incrementation shall be happening in the body of the loop, like this. Well, this is the difference between the for loop and the while loop. If you recollect, in the for loop, all of these three aspects were present in the same line, but then as far as the while loop is concerned, they are all present, but then they are all not present in the same line. Rather, they are present at these locations as indicated over here. Well, this is the syntax of the while loop. But then you know that whenever loops are involved, loop index variables are also involved, and similar to my previous example, I shall be making use of the variable j as the loop index variable. What I mean to say is that in initialization as well, I shall make use of j. In the condition check as well, I shall be making use of the loop index variable j, and obviously in the incrementation aspect as well, I shall be making use of j. Well, I have set up the loop, just that I need to be providing the initial values to this, and you know that the initial value of j has to be 1. And then in the condition, I just have to tell that the loop has to keep on progressing as long as j happens to be less than or equal to 5. And then when it comes to incrementation, all that I have to do is that at the end of the loop, I will have to be incrementing j. Well, I am sure that it is a pretty simple syntax now, and let me tell you that this program definitely shall provide us with the required output. And what really happens during the execution? Let me explain. When the execution of the program begins, the initial value of j is going to be 1, and when I would check if really j is less than or equal to 5, yes, 1 is less than or equal to 5, and since the condition is true, the control enters the body of the while loop, and it is going to execute the print command, which is going to print a star on the screen, and the cursor will be moving to the next position on the same line. Well, after that, you know that there is a command to increment j, and hence the value of j gets incremented from 1 to 2, and then the control doesn't come out of the loop. Rather, it goes back to the condition, and again we check if the value of j is less than or equal to 5. Obviously, the updated value of j is 2, and 2 definitely less than or equal to 5 evaluates to true, and since the condition is evaluated to true, again the control is going to be entering the body of the while loop, printing the second star, and then obviously after that the value of j gets incremented to 3. This way, I am sure by now you understand that this while loop has been set up by you in such a manner that it shall be repeating itself 5 times, and in the process the same print command is going to get executed 5 times, which is going to be printing us with a horizontal line of stars. I hope I am completely clear with this program that makes use of the while loop, and I am sure you have been able to understand it as well. But then how really do I code the same program using Java? How really do I code the same program using Python? Let me explain. In as far as Java is concerned, you know that this was the program that we had previously coded by making use of the for loop. But now I will eliminate this for loop, and bring in the while loop. Well, you know that in as far as the while loop is concerned, the initialization happens just above the while loop, the condition checking happens over here, and then the incrementation happens in the body. And all that I really have to do is that at the place of initialization, I shall initialize my loop index variable j to 1. And then in the condition check, I shall be specifying that the loop has to repeatedly keep executing till the value of j is less than or equal to 5. And then in incrementation, obviously, I shall increment the value of j each time as the loop progresses. And it is needless for me to now explain that this program definitely shall be giving us with the required output. But then what really is the story associated with Python? Let me explain. In as far as Python code is concerned, well, this was the program that you had previously coded using Python, making use of the for loop. But now I would not wish to use the for loop. Rather, I would eliminate this for loop and bring in the while loop. Well, here again, you know that just above the while loop, I need to be initializing the value of j to 1. As a part of the while loop, I need to specify the condition that the loop has to keep repeating as long as the value of j happens to be less than or equal to 5. And then obviously I will also have to increment j. But then in Python, I cannot be making use of the j++ command to increment j. Rather, I need to say j plus equal to 1. Well, again, different programming languages throw up various kind of syntaxes, and what I really want to convey to my learners is that don't focus on the syntax of the programming language. Rather, try to focus on the art of programming. Well, obviously you have to focus on the syntax of the programming language if this was a course on the programming languages. For that, you have my separate course on C, my separate course on Java, and my separate course on Python, where I have dealt with all of these aspects in great detail. But then this course, being a course on programming, let all of your focus be on the various aspects related to programming rather than your focus being only on the syntax of the programming language. And that way, if you look at the while loop of Python, doesn't have the simple brackets. You know that in case of C programming language, the while loop had that simple bracket. In case of Java as well, the while loop had the simple brackets, but then in Python we do not have it. Well, due to this lack of standardization, sometimes the beginners who really want to master programming get involved in the syntax of the programming languages and finally think that programming is really difficult. But all that I would wish to say you is that as long as your focus is on the core logic, then really the programming language doesn't matter much. So whatever are the small changes in as far as the code is concerned with respect to the respective programming languages, you for the time being neglect it and keep it aside. But then I'm sure at a macro level, even this piece of code is completely clear to you, and upon execution, definitely we shall be getting the required results. All said and done, keeping these programming languages nuances aside, I'm sure you have definitely understood the power of loop and how you can actually simplify the repetitive activity in programming by placing that repetitive activity within a loop. Anyway, now that you have understood as to how you can print a horizontal line of stars using the top 3 programming languages and using the different types of loops, it's now for us to understand as to how we can print a vertical line of stars. So let me proceed and tell you what really is the logic to print a vertical line of stars. If we have to print a vertical line of stars, then firstly I need to print a star. Well, you know that in C language, this happens to be the printf command that shall be printing a star, but then you know that this will not only print a star, but then the cursor would be blinking besides it. And just in case I want the second star and hence I bring in the second printf command below the previous printf command, still you know that the second star shall get printed at the point where the cursor is blinking. In other words, this is what is going to happen. But then you know that I don't want a horizontal line of stars this time. What I want is a vertical line of star. So the first thing I'll have to do is to eliminate this second printf command and focus on how really I can bring the cursor which is on the first line to the next line. And if you really have to bring the cursor to the new line, then all that you have to do is to have this printf command. Yes, Here /n stands for a new line command, and through this print command what you are trying to communicate to the computer is that you now want to bring the cursor to the new line, and upon execution of this second printf command you shall now have the cursor present on the new line. And now that the cursor is present on the new line, obviously you can bring in your printf star command, and obviously I have told you that whenever the star is going to get printed, it shall always get printed where the cursor is blinking, and hence the second star gets printed below the previous star. But then you should also know that the cursor will now be blinking besides the second star. So just in case you bring in the third printf command, then what you really have to understand is that the third star shall get printed in the same line. In other words, what I mean to say is that now again you need to ensure that the cursor which is on the second line should come to the new line. And if really that has to happen, you already know that this happens to be the command. Here the /n shall ensure that the cursor moves to the new line, and then once it is on the new line, you can always have the print command that shall print the star. And then you know that I need to have a command to bring the cursor to the new line. So this way, if in case I continue my coding, then definitely I shall be getting a vertical line of 5 stars. But then I am sure that most of my learners by now have realized that this is not an efficient way of coding because the activity is repeating and we have not made use of loops. So how really can I make this program more efficient by making use of loops? Let me explain. When you will look at this piece of code, I'm sure you realize that it is basically these two lines that are repeating themselves 5 times. And whenever you happen to encounter such a scenario in programming, all that you have to do is to write these 2 lines of code only once. But then if you want these 2 lines of code to be repeatedly executed 5 times, then you can bring in a for loop like this. And you know that in case of the for loop, we shall have the initialization, the condition check, as well as the incrementation in the same line like this. And you also know that we will have to make use of the loop index variable, and I shall be making use of the loop index variable j. And it is needless for me to say that initially the value of j shall be 1, and I would wish these 2 print commands to get executed repeatedly as long as the value of j happens to be lesser than or equal to 5, and as I progress through the loop, the value of j should be getting incremented. In other words, what I had previously written as 10 lines of code now is just reduced to this much of it. And obviously, if I would execute this, I would not be getting the output because this is not at all a complete program. I will have to declare the variable j, and I will also have to bring in these extra fittings if really this program has to execute. And now that I have done all of it, then upon execution, I shall be getting the required result. So I'm sure that through this example, you have been able to understand as to how you can print a vertical line of stars, and that you have also most importantly understood as to how using the printf /n command that you can bring the cursor to the new line. All said and done, now that you have understood the C version of this program, what really is the Java version of it? What really is the Python version of it? Let me explain. In as far as Java is concerned, you know that this happens to be the line of code that shall be printing a star on the screen. But then you also know that the cursor would be blinking besides the star. If you want a vertical line of stars, then your focus should be to bring this cursor to the new line, and this happens to be the line of code in Java that shall be bringing the cursor to the new line. Well, through my previous example, you have understood that it is these 2 lines of code that I should be repeatedly executing 5 times, and hence I bring in the for loop like this. And here it is needless for me to say that I need to initialize my loop index variable j to 1. I need to specify the condition that the loop should keep progressing as long as j is less than or equal to 5, and that each time that I progress through the loop, that the value of j should be getting incremented by 1. Obviously, I should be declaring my loop index variable j as well. All said and done, when I would execute this program, I would not be getting the required output because this is not at all a complete program in Java. If in case I bring in the necessary attachments like this, then it means that the program is complete and can be understood by the Java compiler, and upon compilation and execution, this is what I shall be getting as the output. Anyway, for somebody who had understood the same code in C language, it is pretty easy to understand the Java version of it as well. No doubt, there are many elements in this Java code about which you are clueless, and as I have previously told you, I recommend you to be watching my video series on Java. But then, as of now, as far as the core part of the logic is concerned, I am sure all of my learners have understood that this is the way that we can write the program to print a vertical line of stars. Now that you have understood the Java version, what is the Python version of it? Let me explain. In as far as Python code is concerned, you know that this was the print command using which we had previously printed a star on the screen. But then again in this case as well, not only a star gets printed on the output screen, the cursor shall also be blinking just besides the star. Now my responsibility is to get the cursor to the new line, and in Python, if I really have to get the cursor to the new line, all that I have to do is to remove this piece of code. Yes, Python, I am sure, is such a programming language which has always been surprising you all through this video series. And if really you need to bring in the cursor to the new line in Python, you actually need not bring in any new print command. Rather, all that you have to do is to eliminate this piece of code. The moment you do that, then automatically the cursor shall be present on the new line. In other words, this print command is such a command which is not only going to be printing a star on the screen, but shall also automatically ensure that the cursor is already present on the new line. But then, you know, if I would want to have a vertical line of 5 stars, then this print command needs to be enclosed within a loop. Say supposing I use the for loop like this, and then upon execution, this happens to be the output. Oops, again you can see that what I have got indeed is a vertical line of stars, but then there are only 4 stars in the output. And I have already previously told you that in Python, if in case you are making use of the for loop, then it is your responsibility to ensure that the upper limit of the loop is always incremented by 1 extra number so that you get the exact count of the number of stars. Here, the upper limit 5, I will have to increment it to 6, and then when I'll execute the program, I would be getting the required result. I'm sure in this session, you have definitely been able to understand as to how you can be printing a vertical line of stars. Moving ahead in this video series, we shall dive deeper and understand as to how we can create more complicated patterns. All of these different kinds of patterns is what you shall be learning moving forward, and definitely the sessions that you have understood till now are going to be acting as a strong foundation for you to proceed ahead and write programming code that shall be creating such kind of outputs on the output screen. If you really want to achieve all of that, then only thing that you need to do is to continue watching this video series. Hope this foundation was really informative for you, and definitely if you have to build upon this foundation, then meet me in my next session. Thanks for watching. Let's meet again in my next session.